Hope you guys are feeling ready and wired. So this afternoon, I want to start by telling you a story. Now, this story starts in high school. My parents wanted to give me the best opportunity to go to college, and they felt like they had everything going for me, except one thing. I was too quiet, and I was too introverted. And colleges didn't want to take someone that didn't want to raise their hand in a scary classroom of over 40 people. So what did my parents do? They enrolled me in high school leadership. And in order to get an A in high school leadership, you had to participate. And so there was no better way to participate than to run for freshman class president. But there was one major problem, in that my opponent was this popular, outgoing jock. And there's this quiet, kind of timid me. And finally, election day arrives, and election speeches. He gets up there and he talks about how he is the best person, he has the most experience to represent the freshman class. And then I go up there. I stand up. I tell everyone, stand up and hug the person next to you. Because I'm not trying to run for me. I'm trying to run for you, you, and you. Because what I want to do is I want to help you be the best freshman class president ever. And the best freshman class, excuse me. Later that day, I found out that I had won the election. And from that experience, I became a leader that focused on helping others. Things really began to take off in December of 2007. I just watched Barack Obama talk on television, and I was inspired by his message to create change. And so I signed up on an emailing list, not thinking too much about it. And I got this email back saying oh, all the local volunteers are coming to this local Pizza Hut. So I was like, okay, I'll show up. And I get to this volunteer get-together at Pizza Hut. And they talk about, okay, we need to really fundraise money right now, because Hillary Clinton is literally kicking our ass. And no one knows who Barack Obama is. And I'm like, okay, well, how can I do? What can I do to help out? And it's like, well, my dad owns a golf course. We could do a fundraiser there. But there's one major problem. He's a Republican. And he's not going to be voting for Obama anytime soon. But if there's one thing that's great about family is that they're always there to help you out. And so my dad let me host a fundraiser, and we were able to raise $2,000. And my dad was, oh, thank you. And my dad even gave some money too. So thanks, Dad. From there, I got a phone call from Students for Barack Obama. And they asked me to join on as regional coordinator. And then half a year later, I became state director running all the California operations, where from there, finally on election day, on November 4th, 2008, we had found out that Obama won. Now, I was really lucky that I was able to attend the inauguration. And while the festivities were amazing, what really changed me at that moment was when I was doing this ABC interview. And this ABC anchor asked me, what does change mean to you? And I kind of scratched my head, because it's like, well, when most people ask me that question, they ask me in terms of, what does change mean to Obama? No one had ever asked me, what does change mean to me? Because after all, there are all these seas of issues, which you can't see, because my slides are out. Now you can see them. These are the sea of issues. And it's like, which one is the best one? Which one are the ones that you should focus on to actually create change? Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of time to think about it, because tragedy struck at our high school. There was a drive-by shooting that occurred. And unfortunately, a bullet ricocheted off a wall. And it hit this little baby who just was shy of turning 2 years old. And it threw our entire high school community into a state of chaos. No one really knew what to do. I didn't really know what to do. At the time, I was close friends with my high school principal. His name was Ramos. And I remember sitting down in his office. He was like, Pip. He called me Pip back then. He's like, Pip, moments of tragedies, most people freeze up. But you can turn this tragedy into an opportunity to bring people together. Every day, there are good things that happen and there are bad things. But what you have to remember is that you can act in both. And so what we proceeded to do, we didn't know what we could do, but what we proceeded to do is we hosted a fundraiser. and we were able to raise $1,500 for the family. And there's a picture of us, and there's Rodriguez, who was the vice principal, handing the gifts and the money to this family. And it was from that experience that I was reminded that, don't only act in good times, but also act in the bad, because it's important to be that person that you wish to be. So finally, my senior year comes around, and I'm applying to colleges. And I'm like, okay, well, the youngest politician in California, was a state director for Obama's campaign. There would be no problems applying to colleges. I ended up applying to 18 universities because I really didn't know where I wanted to go. And I'm waiting for acceptance letter to come after acceptance letter. But what I instead get is rejection letter after rejection letter. And it was so bad that I only got accepted into one school, George Washington University in DC. And I got waitlisted at the University of Chicago. And so on my way to DC, I stop in Chicago. I sit down with my admissions officer, and I tell her I need to get into this school. And then a week later, I get into the University of Chicago. Now, finally at the University of Chicago, everyone's definition of success, how they believed that we should change the world, is to become a consultant or an investment banker. The idea was that you were going to make your millions, and then you were going to donate that to charity later. And at the time, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I applied for all these positions. But as luck had it, not only did I not get any of the positions, I didn't even get an interview. So I was scratching my head and like, okay, what am I going to do now? And it was just by chance I was reading this Huffington Post piece about education reform in Australia. And so I emailed the author. I'm like, hey, I'd really love to come work for you in Australia. And long story short, that summer, I found myself in Australia where he paid for my housing and he gave me a salary on top of that. But then 2 weeks into my internship in Australia, the CEO steps down. And in addition to stepping down as the Foundation for Young Australians, he stepped down as the co-chair of the UN Youth Committee of Australia. And I'll never forget this moment because at 1 o'clock he emailed me. He was like, Patrick, do you want to take over for me at the UN? I'm like, of course. So I get promoted to co-chair of the UN Youth Committee of Australia. And on top of that, Melbourne is hosting the 63rd annual UN conference. And as the only person there that wasn't balding, and I was 19 at the time, they asked me to run social media for the UN. And I'm like, well, I've used Facebook, I've kind of dabbled a little bit in Twitter, but I don't know if I'm qualified to run social media for the United Nations. But I tried anyways. I opened up the accounts, I had conversations with people, and during our 3-day conference, reached over 1.2 million people. From there, the UN was so surprised that they flew me to New York, where I again ran social media for the big MDG summit. And at the MDG summit, essentially all the presidents and all the dignitaries of every single country, they come to the UN to talk about what they're going to do about poverty. But at the same time, I gave them my confession. Look, I'm not Australian, don't have an Australian accent, but what I do really care about is helping college students. And it just so happened that Secretary General Ban Ki-moon was launching this new initiative called United Nations Academic Impact, which was focused on helping college students make a social impact in the world. And so I joined that committee, and in the course of 5 months, we were able to go from 0 universities to 750 universities in just 5 months. But then we hit a brick wall. Universities wanted to know what it meant to change the world. They had heard about poverty, they had heard about all these big lofty goals and ideas, but what does it really mean? The UN came back and they said, we don't want to define what change should be for you. And I was stuck in the middle. I couldn't give any direct orders as to what change should be because the UN felt like it shouldn't define that. But I still wanted to make an impact. But luckily, an opportunity came. I met this guy named Tombe Harry. Now, Tombe is an entrepreneur in Cameroon. His parents were farmers, and his country is starving. But because he grew up on a farm, he noticed that there was all this food around him. Why is his country starving? What he deduced, what he began to realize, is that it wasn't a lack of food. It was that the farmers were all going to the same markets every single day instead of going to the markets where people actually needed the food. And so he devised this plan to create an SMS platform where he could text farmers where they should go. And in order to make that idea into a reality, What he did is he wanted to apply for a startup accelerator called the Unreasonable Institute. But in order to attend the Unreasonable Institute, he had to raise $10,000. And in the first year, he was only able to raise $4,000. And then we met afterwards. And I was like, well, Tom Bay asked me, Patrick, can you help me out? I'm like, well, I've never done social media fundraising before, but I'll try. And in the course of 10 weeks, we were able to raise $10,000 for him. And he was then able to actually go to the Startup Accelerator and create his company called Amise Cameroon. From there, we went on to really create my first social business, which was called Kip Solutions. And Tom Bay was really our inspiration for that, where we helped essentially for-purpose companies create a social impact in the world. And we would go on to help companies in India and Cambodia. And we were also featured as Inc. magazine's coolest college startup for 2012. And on top of that, this past February, our company was acquired by a New York-based consulting firm. And then I graduated college too, this past June. So now I'm 23, only a few months out of college. And people ask me, what's the secret to success? And what I've come to learn, really, it's about persistence. One of the most common things I hear is like, I need to get experience or I need to get knowledge. But really, if you're willing to ask the questions, take on the challenges, and at least try, you're going to get extremely far. While one person can't do everything, one person can do anything. The other thing I learned and was told is that you have to be ruthless in politics and in business. But if you're a taker, if you're ruthless, when you win, someone else loses. In politics, there's one of the most well-known US politicians is this guy named Abraham Lincoln. And his nickname was Honest Abe. He became a success because he was nice and he stuck to his values. Because when you're a giver, when you legitimately and genuinely care about the people around you, when you win, other people win. And when everyone wins around you, that winning and that giving cascades. And finally, to return to that question that ABC anchor asked me, what does it really mean to create an impact? Is it, going back to the sea of issues, is it about healthcare? Is it about poverty? After spending time in social media, people talk about social networks like Facebook and Twitter. And what they forget is the original social network, the human network, a network like how we are today. And so what I've come to believe is that changing the world is really about you, and you. Because changing the world is about changing another person's life. Thank you.